Hey, everybody, this is episode number 55 of the Leading While Green podcast, where my mission is to help you live, learn, and lead with confidence. My guest on this episode is Rebecca Zucker, executive coach, expert in leadership and career development, partner at Next Step Partners, contributor to the Harvard Business Review and Forbes. She's worked with some of the top companies in the country, training and coaching their leaders, and she's my guest today. So listen up. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the podcast, and I'm really grateful to all of you who support, to each and every one of you who have gone onto iTunes and left a review. Maybe you listen to this on a different platform, and that's fine too. All of you who listen are part of this journey, and I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for those of you who posted to your social media, who leave comments on my blog, prcquinn.com, who text, who tweet, who email, who let people know about this leadership journey. We got some amazing things coming up for you over the next several episodes. Got some great interviews that you really want to pay attention to. And I'm working on a special project, my leadership course. Yep, my Leading While Green leadership course. It's been in the works for a while now. And ever since I came out with a book a few years ago, people have been asking me for a companion course or follow-up conversation. And that will be available shortly. So keep that on your mind as you're listening to these podcast episodes. And if you're on my mailing list, you'll get firsthand information on all of the happenings. So hop over to prcquinn.com and jump on the mailing list. Okay. Excited about my conversation today with Rebecca Zucker. It's always a privilege to work with the individuals who coach and mentor and lead those who are in charge of the top companies in the world. We have a great conversation that focuses on what you need to do to be resilient. So take a listen to our conversation today. This is Pierre Quinn, and you're listening to another episode of the Leading While Green podcast, where my mission is to help you live, learn, and lead with confidence. I'm excited because my guest on this episode of the podcast is Rebecca Zucker. Rebecca, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Now, Rebecca is an executive coach. She's an expert in leadership and career development. She's a partner at Next Step Partners. She contributes to the Harvard Business Review and Forbes. I mean, every company, Amazon, Clorox, Bain & Company, DocuSign, Dropbox, eBay, Expedia, some of the best known companies around the world. Rebecca has coached their leaders. She graduated valedictorian from the Leonard N. Stern School of Business at NYU, MBA from Stanford, investment banker, Disney Europe. I mean, this is a storied profile, Rebecca. Take us back. How did you start? Did you come from humble beginnings? What did it look like at the beginning?
Wow. Well, big question. Let's see. I grew up in a suburban area outside Philadelphia. And, I think that growing up with two older brothers taught me a lot. And it taught me to speak up, first of all, in order to be heard. And I think that my family and my father in particular just instilled the value of hard work. And that's what I attribute a lot of my accomplishments to, is just a lot of hard work.
So how'd you know you wanted to follow this business route? I mean, NYU is a tall order. What made you go down that road?
Well, I'm a city girl, first of all. So I was drawn to the big city, and I had a real interest in international business. So growing up in the suburbs, I really wanted to get out and see the world. And I had this curiosity about what else was out there. And NYU was known for its international program. But I figured that whatever field I ended up going into professionally, whether it was journalism or art or medicine, everything is a business. So I should go learn about business. And that's the way I looked at what I studied, both undergraduate and graduate.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your work today at Next Step Partners. and then let's work backwards from there. So
Sure.
give us some insight about what the organization does and how long you've been involved with it.
Well, I am one of the co-founders. We were founded almost 17 years ago, and we work with leaders at various levels in all different sectors, both for-profit and nonprofit, essentially helping them to be more effective, whether that is working more effectively with their teams or with other stakeholders in their organization. We're typically not working on technical skills like accounting or engineering. We are working a lot of times on the softer skills.
Okay, so this idea of soft skills, and I'm sure you've seen it transition in the conversations on leadership over the years. Why is it that you think that we don't necessarily pay attention to soft skills during our formalized education, and then they become a big deal once we get into the workforce?
That's a great question. I think a lot of schools are increasingly incorporating this factor. You see a lot of schools now incorporating leadership into their curriculum. That wasn't always the case. I know, frankly, it wasn't the case when I went through school, but I think that programs are now definitely turning on and cluing in to how important these soft skills are in being able to get things done and, frankly, how to change the world.
Okay, so we have on your bio, we have Goldman Sachs, we have Disney, we have now Next Step Partners. Yes. What's been sort of the recurring theme in every place that you've gone? What personal strength have you been able to leverage, or what sort of things are you seeing over and over again?
Great question. I think the common thread throughout my career is that I've always been drawn to the people side of things. And that was actually a big clue that was all around me. And it took me some time to realize that this was the right path for me. Much of my earlier career was spent in finance. And so even at Disney, I was in a finance function. And while I was good at finance, I didn't get a lot of fulfillment or excitement around spreadsheets. I just loved the people side of things. And I was always at the front of the line when it came to coaching, mentoring, recruiting, anything that dealt with people development, I loved. And I finally realized that and started paying attention to it and ultimately pursued that as my career. So I feel very blessed to finally be doing something that is very consistent with who I am, with my values, my passions, my interests.
So let's go back a couple of years, because sometimes when people read your bio, and I know you've spoken and you've coached, sometimes the bio is a bit unfair, because it strips away, all the challenges, all the lessons you made, all the grit and determination you had to put in.
Yes.
Take us back to a time in your career where you were thinking, man, either I messed that up or this was a good lesson learned and I'll remember to do it differently next time.
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Well, I think going back even to high school, my family teases me, but I was a cheerleader, and you had to basically re-audition every year for cheerleading. It's sort of like, the football squad. You have to try out every year. And one year I didn't make it. And what happened was I choked during the tryouts. And that was a huge lesson for me, how much mindset matters and hard work. It's not just the hard work and practice that goes into a performance, but it's the mindset piece that really can make the difference between something that is great and exceptional and something that just doesn't cut it.
Okay, I think we can pick at this a little bit more. Do you have an example of, and I know you have to change names and change companies and non-disclosure and all of that, but do you have an example of maybe working with a leader who he or she, great on paper, great in a small room, got all the education, got all the work stuff on their resume, but when it came down to a big moment, they kind of choked, and then you had to coach them through that mindset piece.
Yes, I have a client. She was a leader at a company that she worked at for a very long time, and the company was going through some difficulties. And she made a presentation to the board of directors, and it did not go well. She got berated with all sorts of really hard questions, and she was on her back heel the entire time. And the challenge here for her was that instead of really learning from this experience and thinking about what could I have done differently, or how might I handle this differently next time? What do I now know that can better prepare me for future challenges like this? She ruminated endlessly and beat herself up continuously. And it was this cycle that she really was having a hard time breaking. And what I was helping her do was to try and break that cycle by taking more of a growth mindset to this experience and tapping into the learning. As painful of an experience as it was for her, and we all had those experiences, a presentation that doesn't go well, or a piece of business that you've lost, or a client that you've lost, things don't always go our way. And resilience is the ability to deal effectively with change and adversity. And, for this person, for this leader, it was really to be able to step back and see what the gift was in this really painful experience, and how she can take that experience forward to do even better next time, but also to have self-compassion. And that is one of the key elements of resilience. People who have more self-compassion, which is the ability to recognize that we are all imperfect human beings, and that we do make mistakes, and that we do fail from time to time, and that's normal, and we can bounce back from it and be even better going forward. So to forgive ourselves for those screw ups.
How do you address this idea, if you've dealt with it in your career? People look at your history and they say, well, it's easy for you to say because, and then they check off the boxes. Or, I've had people to say, Pierre, it's easy for you. You get to interview all these cool, influential people and they check off these boxes. But you're sort of positioning it that this idea of resilience tends to level the playing field a little bit. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it can level the playing field in that, resilience, it's not only a professional skill, it's a life skill. And the great part is that it can be developed over time. So even if you're not the most resilient person now, it's like going to the gym. You can build this muscle. And the more resilient you are, the better able you are to tackle the challenges that come your way, which will happen. It's part of life. There are ups and downs and peaks and valleys, and it's being able to weather those tough times. So it levels the playing field by being able to get through those valleys.
I want to unpack this resilience idea a little bit more, but I got to slide this question in there. Having worked with people who were changing careers and growing leaders, what are some of the themes that you see in people who are individuals transitioning from college life, and then they hit the workforce? What are some things that kind of just slap them and they weren't ready for that, and they kind of have to bounce back and learn to adjust on the fly coming out of college?
That's a great question. I think for some people, it is the notion that they are no longer in charge of their own schedule and they have responsibilities and need to report to other people. And that can be challenging depending on, what one is accustomed to previously. But the other challenge that I've seen is someone may be a great student, the top of their class, and a high performer. And now they get into the working world, which is competitive in a much different way, I would say, than school. The company that or the organization that they might be working for might be hiring the cream of the crop across all different schools. And so now you're not the golden child. Now you are one of maybe hundreds or thousands of highly accomplished people, and learning to collaborate and perhaps work in a different way than you may have been accustomed to at school.
One of the things that I do when I train younger leaders, I talk to them about how, in school, we teach you how to be good by yourself. And then when you enter the workforce, we're trying to get all of you smart and talented individuals to sit down at the table and learn how to work together. And I'm sure you have some not so nice stories of individuals who had some challenges kind of working together.
Well, and I think it's also learning that it's not about you. It's about the organization and their goals and its mission. And also to have patience in the progression of your career. I once worked with a client who, granted, she had made great sacrifices moving across the country for a position, and she was very eager to get promoted. And she basically showed up to work every day. Am I getting promoted yet? Am I getting promoted yet? And it wasn't serving her.
Wow.
Yes. So it not only was not working for her employer, but it was making her very agitated and unhappy. And recognizing that sometimes you have to, keeping your eye on the horizon, you have to plug away and just put one foot after the other, and recognizing that things will add up over time and you need to be a little patient.
Well, this is sticking with our theme of resilience here. So talk to us about you write and you teach and you train and coach on resilience. Talk to me about these 4 traps that can inhibit our resilience, and maybe 5 tools or resources that we can use to build our resilience.
Yes. So there are a number of traps that people can fall into that can inhibit their resilience. The first is rumination. And I think we've all been guilty of this, myself included. Rumination is the mental process of going over and over and over something in your mind and attaching negative emotion to it. And that could be replaying past events, like my client was doing with her board presentation, or it could be worrying about something that has not yet happened in the future. And so that's very different from reflecting on the past and learning from it and planning for the future. Rumination really is not productive at all. So it's being able to break that cycle. And I'll talk a little bit about that with some of the tools that I mentioned. Another trap people can fall into is the drama triangle. And this is a model that was developed about 50 years ago that looks at the typical roles people can fall into in certain interactions. And there are 3 roles in the triangle. There is the victim, the villain, and the hero. And we tend to gravitate towards one of these roles, but at one time or another, we all fall into the victim role. And the victim role is a pretty powerless place to be. It's not that fun. And so being able to get out of that role is important in developing our resilience. Another trap people fall into is having a fixed mindset. And people with a fixed mindset, really, they attribute outcomes or results to what they perceive to be fixed qualities, that essentially we're as smart as we're ever going to be, and that people fundamentally can't change. The problem with a fixed mindset, and we've all had a fixed mindset about someone or something at some point in time, but the problem with it is, when it comes to resilience, is that people with a fixed mindset don't handle change as well. They tend to view change as a threat versus an opportunity. And the last trap that people can fall into are what are called the 3 Ps. And these were identified by Martin Seligman, who's the founder of the positive psychology movement. And they are personalization, which is it's my fault that things are bad. Pervasiveness, that if one thing is terrible, then everything is terrible. And permanence, that if it's bad now, it's always going to be bad. And studies have shown that people who are more resilient don't view their situation as being entirely their fault, but the result of many different things that have culminated in that situation. And they don't see them as lasting forever or permeating every aspect of their life. But moving on, do you have any questions on those, or I can move on to the tools?
Oh, I do. So we're looking at rumination, the drama triangle, the fixed mindset, and 3 Ps. Now, let's go back to this drama triangle for a little bit. Are there some, because it seems like you can turn from one to the other fairly quickly. Are there some behaviors or attitudes? Say I'm a victim. Is there maybe one behavior, one strategy? If I turn one way, I end up maybe being the hero or the victor. But if I turn the other way, I end up being the villain. Is there like a strategy or a thought process to guide me in that area?
Yeah, well, I would say I wouldn't look at it so much as wanting to shift roles within that triangle. It's wanting to get out of the triangle altogether.
This is good.
And if you find yourself in the victim role in a situation, there are a few things that you can do. One is to start to think like a problem solver and take responsibility for creating solutions, that you have more agency or control than you might think over your situation. And that might be just around what perspective you're taking on the situation. The other antidote to the victim mindset is gratitude. That's a great way to get out of the victim mode. Asking yourself, what am I grateful for? What did I accomplish this week or today?
Okay, so we have these 4 traps. What are our 5 tools? We say we want to build our resiliency. How do we build it up?
Well, there's what I call the 5 Ps, and they are perspective, peace, people, prior experience, and perseverance. To start with perspective, there are 2 aspects to this. One is to take what's called a growth mindset. And as I alluded to earlier with my client, the growth mindset is really recognizing that mistakes and failures happen and that this is precisely how we learn and grow. So when you do encounter those types of situations, it's like, okay, this is one of those times. This is a great learning opportunity, and being able to take that perspective. Another element is to be able to see multiple perspectives of a situation. I had a client who several years ago lost his job, and he was unemployed for quite some time. And it was very demoralizing for him, and he had a hard time getting out of that. And we explored all different perspectives. The one he was taking was, I'm a loser, which wasn't really quite working for him, and impacting his interactions with other people and creating sort of this vicious downward spiral. And I asked him the question, what would your future self say about this period of time 20 years from now? Mm-hmm. And he immediately, without hesitation, said, oh, it's a blip. And wow. I said, that's exactly it. This is a blip in your career. And it was being able to take on that perspective, that this is a brief period in time in the entire course of my life that I will get through, and to be able to see the other side of things. So many years later, it indeed was a blip. He is now a very successful partner at a hedge fund and doing quite well. The next aspect, the element, what I call peace, is really a combination of things. And it's things like gratitude, mindfulness, kindness, and compassion. And mindfulness and compassion are actually the 2 elements that are scientifically proven to best rewire the brain for resilience. And mindfulness is just focusing one's full attention on the present, experiencing thoughts, feelings, sensations without judgment. And that's the really hard part, the without judgment part, because we're making judgments all the time. And this really helps create the self-awareness and shifts in perspectives that allow us to see what's happening and how we're reacting and how we might respond differently to triggers or to events in our life. And, gratitude, as I mentioned, being grateful for what we do have. And compassion, and in particular, self-compassion, is huge. Again, my client at the board presentation really could have benefited a lot from this. And compassion is really caring in the face of struggle. And self-compassion is showing ourselves that same kind of kindness, care, and concern that you would show a loved one or someone else that you care about. And like mindfulness, self-compassion is an antidote to rumination. It can help break that cycle and get you out of it. The next element of people, there are two aspects of this. One is having other people to look to as examples of resilience. And these can be public figures like Nelson Mandela or J.K. Rowling or somebody in the public eye who has gone through hardship. But it could be people that we know, and learning from how they've handled their own situations and getting inspiration from their resilience. But the other aspect of this people part of the model is surrounding ourselves with other resilient people can actually make us more resilient because of a concept known as emotional contagion. And it works in both directions. If somebody in a group panics, other people are likely to panic. But if that one person is calm and level-headed, other people are likely to be calm and level-headed. So surrounding ourselves with resilient people, or even better, being that resilient person for other people so that they can also be resilient.
Let me jump in right here on this one. This idea of surrounding myself with resilient people, and we've kind of heard themes about this growing up. Parents would tell us, be careful the friends you make, the company you keep. But what do you say to the executive or the emerging leader who says, listen, I'm an adult. I don't have time to make new friends or new associates, and everybody I hang out with is negative. So I'm just doomed to be around people who are going to sap my energy.
Well, first of all, if you're saying I'm doomed, you're in the victim role. So that's something to look at. And if you are surrounded by primarily negative people, you have to look at what might you need to do to change your surroundings. But like I said, they can make a conscious choice to be that positive or resilient person and be the sort of igniter of positive emotional contagion, if you will. But research has also shown that, our longevity and our livelihood, our well-being depends on our connections with other people. So it's important to have, it doesn't have to be a lot of people, but it's important to have a small group of really good, positive people in our lives. And you're never too old or experienced to have that.
Absolutely. Give us the last two.
So the last two, the next one is prior experience. And that is looking at our own lives and drawing inspiration from our own past experiences and how we may have gotten through hard times in the past. There's a lot that we can learn from ourselves, quite frankly. And the last one is perseverance, which is, at the end of the day, it's putting one foot in front of the other and plugging away, keeping at it. Angela Duckworth, who wrote the book Grit, which is a great book, by the way, she defines grit as the combination of passion and perseverance. And that's a great skill set to have that commitment to really apply your best and keep moving forward.
Okay, so we have perspective, we have peace, we have people, we have prior experience, and then we have perseverance as the 5 tools that we can use to help build our resilience. Talk to
Yeah.
us a little bit about pushback when you're maybe someone who thinks about leadership in a linear sort of fashion, and you present these ideas for growth, for team chemistry, for improving their relationships with their staff, and they push back and say, I'm not here for all that fluffy stuff. Just tell me what I need to tell them and help me make them listen so we can get this job done.
Right. Well, I would say there's many ways of going at that. One is, how's that working for you? And the other thing that comes to mind is teaching someone how to fish. I could just tell you what to do here, but let's talk about what the right answer is for you. And you're more likely to know what that is than me. I'm here to facilitate you getting to that answer and to help show them different perspectives or ways of looking at their situation. If they're just looking for the quick fix, they are probably going to find themselves in that situation again pretty quickly.
So we'll end on this. This has been great stuff, and the time has really been flying by. And you started Next Step Partners 17 years ago?
Yes.
17 years ago. So throughout that span of 17 years, do you have a couple of maybe stories or situations that you look back and say, this is why I got into this work. This is what makes it real to me and keeps me going. It helps me be resilient, especially when I have maybe some difficult times.
Yes. Well, I think it's a lot of things. It's no one thing. I mean, I do this work because I love supporting other people to succeed. And my client's success is my success. And whether that's a small win, like a meeting that they were really anxious about went well, or that they got a promotion or a great new job, that's what I love, is hearing about all of their successes. And that is what makes all of the work that I do worth it. So whether, like I said, whether it's a small win or something really big, it's finding joy in other people's success.
Finding joy in other people's success. I think as leaders, that's something that we all need to lean toward. Rebecca, thanks for joining me today. Now, where can we keep up with you? What's the website, email address, LinkedIn? How do we stay connected?
Yes. Well, you can follow me on Twitter at RS Zucker. And our website is nextsteppartners.com. If you go to nextsteppartners.com/list, you can also get a copy of our favorite leadership development resources.
Okay. We'll put all of that in the show notes.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Rebecca Zucker. I know I sure did. And you're going to have to go back and listen to the section of our conversation about resilience, the 4 traps that inhibit resilience, and the 5 tools to help build it. And make sure you check out the links in the show notes so you can stay connected to Rebecca and follow up with her. Now, I want to encourage you to hop over to iTunes, leave this podcast a 5-star review and some comments. Maybe you want to leave some comments on my blog, prccoin.com, where you find this episode of the podcast. Maybe you want to text, tweet. Maybe you want to post it to your Facebook page and let everybody know about this leadership journey that we've been on. I'm really, really grateful that you're supporting me, that you're supporting other people who listen, and that we're growing in community. And until next time, take care and God bless.